Joey Kocur's right hand was a loaded weapon. He didn't just win fights, he ended them. Noses, cheekbones, eye sockets, Kocur broke them all. He was the last person anyone wanted to tangle with. Brad Dalgarno was no exception. Before the punch that shattered his face, Brad Dalgarno was just a kid trying to fit into a game that demanded he be something he wasn't. And Joey Kocur? Well, he was hockey's one-man wrecking crew, ready to reinforce hockey's code with blood and broken bones. This is the story of Brad Delgarno and the painful encounter with a punishing enforcer that changed his career and his life forever. Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni channel, where we celebrate the legends of hockey's golden era in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Now, if you were like me and used to run to the mailbox on the day that the hockey news arrived, well, you found a home here where we have the most knowledgeable hockey community on YouTube. Now, in today's show, we have three stories. We'll get to player reaction, the passing of one of hockey's all-time great legends. We have a notorious, bloody minor league battle from the 1970s we'll revisit. But we'll begin with a fascinating story of Brad Delgarno. Brad Delgarno wasn't born to fight. But 1980s NHL, if you were 6'3" and 200 pounds, you didn't get asked. You were expected to drop the gloves. Now, born in Vancouver and raised in London, Ontario, Delgarno was a soft-spoken, intelligent, physically gifted winger. He could hit, he could grind, but he never once thought of himself as a fighter. He was drafted in the first round of the 1984 OHL draft by the Hamilton Steelhawks, who were full of tough, well-known guys like Bob Probert and Shane Corson and Jeff Jackson. Now, eventually, Probert was shipped off to Sault Ste. Marie, and Delgarno was expected to pick up some of the fighting responsibilities. And that's just how it worked. Brad put up some impressive numbers for the Steelhawks, but it was one televised fight with Probert, with a 17-year-old Delgarno impressively held his own. Well, that changed everything.
This is paired up. There's going to be... all right, now Probert. Now the 260. Probert and Lafreniere. Or Delgarno, yeah. Delgarno and Probert. The 216s. This is, it's Delgarno and Probert. This thing is right on the verge. Boy, they're throwing them too, I'll tell you something. They are big and strong. That Delgarno is 3 years younger too, and that's quite a minute, you know. He's standing right in there. Well, Delgarno is 6'3". Probert is 6'3". It's all over the ice. Everybody has squared off.
GM's eyes lit up. Well, that skill, that size, that toughness. Suddenly, Brad jumped from being a second or third round prospect to being selected by the New York Islanders in round one, number 6 overall, 1985 NHL entry draft. Suddenly, the quiet kid who played guitar and didn't much like conflict was being compared to talented and tough New York Islander legends Clark Gillies and Bobby Nystrom. Now, Brad Delgarno wasn't just a prospect, he was supposed to be the next big and productive Islander. After a stint in the minors, Brad became an Islanders' third-line checker in 1987-88, and putting up modest totals over the next 2 seasons. He was steadily progressing, and his future was promising. And then came February 21, 1989, Nassau Coliseum, Islanders vs. Red Wings. In the second period, Delgarno cross-checked Detroit's defenseman Gilbert Delorme, who crashed into the boards and needed to be helped off the ice. Detroit coach Jacques Demers and Red Wings players were livid. They saw intent to injure. They saw disrespect, and they had the perfect person to gain vengeance, Joey Kocur. Brad recalls, quote, "I thought the penalty was a rather questionable call, but sure enough, 2 shifts later, Kocur was out on the ice every time I came out. I was, well, kind of nervous. I knew he was tough, and the guys on my team kept skating by and telling me, Brad, be careful, Brad, he's out to get you. He's a dangerous guy." You could feel it in the crowd, on the ice, and in the air. Kocur was circling like a shark, blue line to blue line. He didn't care about the puck. He only wanted one thing. That was Brad Delgarno. "You're effing dead," he repeated over and over again, skating back and forth in front of the penalty box, daring Brad to answer the bell. Brad didn't want to, not because he was scared, although how could you not be? Brad knew what Joey Kocur was capable of. Every player in the league did. Now, at this point, no one gave Brad Dalgarno a choice. Not his coach, Al Arbor, who kept putting him back on the ice. Not the refs, who told him, just go get it over with. Not Joey Kocur. he wasn't going away. So Delgarno dropped the gloves. And for a moment, just a moment, he was winning. He threw the first punches, landed clean, but then Kocur's arm slipped free, and he delivered one shot right to the temple.
Rudy ends up behind the net. This is Richard Pilon for the Islanders, but a fight breaks out over in the far corner, and Brad Dalgarno is hammering the daylights. And Joe Kocur he's dangling with. I'm not sure who he's got. Now Dalgarno is on the receiving end of things, but he got about 3 or 4 in quickly. 2 linesmen, DePuzzo and Hodges, pulled them apart. Big back, it was Dalgarno who laid the lick on Delorme. Delorme has not returned. And you get a look at Joe Kocur, all right. He's one of the tough guys, not only with Detroit, but with the entire league. And now Dalgarno is headed down toward the Islander.
Delgarno didn't bleed. He didn't drop right away. But inside his face, everything broke. His cheekbones, his orbital bone, and ultimately his confidence. His entire world shifted. The linesmen Bob Hodges and Pat DePuzzo came in and broke it up, but Kocur got up yelling, "How's your face, bleephead?" Brad skated off on his own, but it was the beginning of the end. Brad would later say it felt like an egg cracked inside of his face. There's no blood, just warm pressure flooding through his jaw and eye. In the morning, a doctor came in and told him he had multiple facial fractures. The structure that held his eye in place was gone. Reconstructive surgery came later. A hole drilled into the side of his head, 2 incisions, careful reconstruction, and the hope that his face would hold together again. And it did, but something else didn't. Brad developed ulcers. He wore a visor to training camp the next year and was told, "Lose a visor or you'll be demoted to the American Hockey League." Well, he was disgusted. Done. At 22 years old, the former first-round pick walked away, retired. He sat across from GM Bill Torrey and said, "There's more to life than proving that I'm something that I'm not." "I'm going on sabbatical," Brad told the Hockey News. "I don't want to play anywhere else. I have a lot of energy that I could put into other fields." At the time, Brad was considering a career in marketing and was prepared to resume his education. He said hockey by far was not my life, and he had lost his love for the game. But that's not where Brad's hockey life ends. He spent a year working in fitness equipment sales, read books, took seminars, attended motivational workshops, got married, and crucially, he attended a game at Maple Leaf Gardens. The Islanders were in town. He went to say hello to some old friends. That night, GM Bill Torrey saw him and said hello. The next morning, Brad's agent called. "Bill wants to know, do you want to come back?" Surprisingly, he said yes. Delgarno returned to camp for the 1989-90 season with a new mindset. He was going to be himself, a smart, physical, honest player. But the biggest hurdles were in his own locker room. His first shift back was a scrimmage. Now, he recalls the other dressing room had a couple of guys going, "F Delgarno coming back. F that. He quit on us. He's a quitter. Let's go get him." But big defenseman Dean Chenoweth was the voice of reason, saying, "Come on, guys, give him a break. Let him do his thing." But Brad was on the ice in front of the other net when the puck dropped and bounced by his feet. He looked down to go get it, and Chenoweth, of all people, came up with a 2-handed cross-check that hit him in the jaw. 5 teeth popped out, and the top half of his jaw was broken. He'd been on the ice for less than a minute. He was picking up teeth. He was on his way to the orthodontist. But this time, Brad came back. He reinvented himself as a third liner, a checker, a banger, a role player with brains and backbone. And then something strange happened. He started belonging. With teammates like Marty McGinnis and Travis Green, they formed the Kid Line. And they weren't superstars, they were grinders, and they were workers. And in 1993, they played pivotal roles in knocking off Mario Lemieux's Penguins, ending their dynasty bid.
The opening moments, and let's see if the Islanders can start fast tonight. Loiselle moving in. There's a wrist shot on Barrasso. Puck comes back to Kasparaitis. Rebound, they score! Brad Delgarno! 25 seconds in, and the Islanders strike quickly.
Years later, an injured wrist spelled the end of his career. He'd opened a bagel shop and then a marketing company. But he didn't need closure. He'd already found it.
But I would think that, I probably didn't understand or prepare for a career in the NHL like I should have. I don't mean to blame my coaches for that, but I think it's a combination of some of the coaching I had leading up to my NHL career. I don't believe I was mentally tough enough for the NHL. I think there's a certain level of kind of a meanness that you need to have when you get to the NHL, and I didn't have that.
Brad Delgarno's story is about a guy who didn't fit the mold and found a way to come back, not as what they wanted, but as he truly was. And for that, he earned more than respect. He earned himself. Hey, before we dive into our second story, who do you think was the most dangerous fighter of the 80s and 90s? Let's discuss in the comments below. Hey, speaking of legendary enforcers, 6'6" Archie Henderson may have been the scariest dude to occupy minor league ice in the 1980s. Now, per usual, however, this notorious man of violence was a great guy off the ice and ended up having an excellent career in hockey personnel. I finally met Archie last year at a Hartford Whalers reunion. We discussed a couple of things. First, a fight he once had with Dave Semenko in Hartford in 1982-83. Now, it used to be on YouTube. I haven't seen it recently. I used to go to those Whalers games. They played Edmonton because, frankly, you couldn't get a ticket to Boston Garden. You couldn't get a ticket in Hartford. And just watching Wayne Gretzky kind of toy with those early 80s Whalers. But in 82-83, the Whalers had Archie Henderson on the bench. The Oilers, of course, had Dave Semenko. You knew something was going to happen. They had a great toe-to-toe battle. Remember, right off to my right. And it was a great toe-to-toe battle between those two all-time heavyweights. However, the first time I became aware of Archie Henderson was while I was reading a Sports Illustrated article on the infamous bloody minor league encounter with Wild Willie Trognitz. Now, here's that story from our doc, Banned for Life.
Trognitz was best known in Toledo as playing left wing on a line with equally notorious enforcers Paul Tarantadini and Doug Mahood on a line called Murder, Inc. That roughhousing trio helped the Gold Diggers to an improbable 1975 Turner Cup championship, remembered by Toledo fans as the Miracle on Main Street. But Trognitz grew tired of this often cartoonish one-dimensional role as a goon and was traded to the Columbus Owls in 1976. By 1977, Columbus had moved to Dayton, Ohio. In 5 games into the 1977-78 season, Dayton squared off in an October 29th game with the Port Huron Flags. The game, however, was secondary to the anticipated fight between Trognitz, the league's reigning heavyweight champion, and a newcomer gunning for his title, a wild-eyed 6'6" maniac named Archie Henderson. This was Henderson's rookie season, and he'd go on to accumulate 566 penalty minutes in 88 regular season and playoff games that year. But to earn his enforcer credentials in the IHL, he'd first have to deal with Trognitz. But to the fans' dismay, Trognitz and Henderson never squared off during this game. But in the IHL, the game was never over until the last drop of blood was spilled. As the game ended, Port Huron winning 4-1, Dayton's Rick Dorman and the Flags' Gary Rissling resumed an earlier fight. When Trognitz, who was leaving the penalty box, rushed to join the fight along with players from both benches. In a quick order, there was a battle royal. Henderson grabbed Dayton's John Flesh by the shirt. Wild Willie, who was 6 feet tall and weighed 215, skated to Flesh's defense, jumped Henderson from behind, and landed 5 or 6 punches to the face, one of which broke Henderson's nose. Henderson, Flesh, and Trognitz went down in a heap, and along came Port Huron's Gary McGonigal to pull Trognitz off Henderson. Trognitz responded by delivering a savage beating to McGonigal. After that, a fatigued Trognitz skated to the Dayton bench and was talking with his coach, Nick Polano, as the officials, general managers, and police tried to get the two teams to their dressing rooms. But at that point, Henderson put down his gloves and stick, broke away from a linesman, and charged around the rink and up the boards towards Trognitz. Trognitz, exhausted from his previous 2 bouts, raised his stick, but that did not deter the charging Henderson. Trognitz then swung his stick at the oncoming Henderson and caught him in the forehead with the blade, splitting his forehead open. Upon seeing this bloodshed, a Port Huron fan somehow got onto the Dayton bench and slugged Trognitz in the side of the head, which caused Trognitz to fall. With Henderson dazed and bleeding, and Trognitz now dazed on the ice, the officials were able to corral both of them to their respective dressing rooms. Henderson needed 8 stitches for his forehead and got his nose reset while also being hospitalized with a concussion. Willie explained the ugly incident this way. "There is no question what I did was wrong," Trognitz said. "I hit him on the head with my stick, and stick swinging can't be part of the game. but I'd already finished the game. I had 2 fights and I was exhausted. This giant lunatic charges at me, screaming, "I'm going to kill you!" So I reacted, figuring he'd never eat 5 feet of lumber to get at me. They told us before the game that Henderson was a bloody lunatic, and I was just trying to get him to stop. 5 days later, Wild Willie was permanently suspended, banned for life from the International Hockey League by President William Began. The whole affair gained worldwide attention. But of course it was the 1970s, so just 4 days after the lifetime ban, the World Hockey Association's Cincinnati Stingers, in dire need of an on-ice policeman, offered Willie a 10-game WHA trial.
You were a hockey fan of the Boston area in the 1970s. Here's a picture of me in my Bruins regalia. You, especially 70-71 season, the Boston Bruins of Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Johnny Busick, John McKenzie, Kent Hodge, Cashman, Jerry Cheevers. In our minds, this team was unbeatable. These players were larger than life and infallible in our minds as young people. However, that bubble was burst by a 6'3" goaltender who came out of nowhere in Cornell University in 1971 and carried the Montreal Canadiens past the Bruins in the first round of the playoffs. Couldn't believe it. It was an incredible performance that still sticks with people of my generation all these years later. Of course, Ken Dryden passed away recently, and at a recent charity event, I had an opportunity to catch up with 3 players whose career was greatly impacted and who probably would have Stanley Cup rings right now if it weren't for Ken Dryden, and that includes Don Marcotte, Rick Middleton, and Terry O'Reilly.
If you had to look at any one man this afternoon, it's got to be Ken Dryden, who's been playing a magnificent net. He simply got them intimidated. No matter what they've done this afternoon, this big guy at 6'4", well over 200 pounds, has had the nets covered up.
And the Montreal Canadiens race out onto the ice to congratulate rookie goaltender Ken Dryden. A tremendous upset by the Montreal Canadiens.
There was one guy that stands out in my mind as the reason for the Bruins losing the first round of the playoffs. It has to be Ken Dryden.
He was a formidable opponent. You know, playing against him, it was the difference in a lot of games, a lot of playoff series. But he was also a very classy gentleman. You know, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say a bad word about him. You know, he's just very intelligent, cerebral, and he, on top of that, he was one of the best goalies in the world. So.
Yeah, when he came up in 71, it was just like for us, we should have won the series, but he just killed us. We just couldn't score any goals on him. And I talked to the rest of the players from Montreal. They say, the only time he plays great is against you guys. Well, then he should have picked somebody else because he cost us a lot. But he was a great goaltender and just a great man, too.
Against them. And when I started in New York, we really didn't have any memorable games that looking back. Until my first year in Boston, going to the finals, first time in my career in the Stanley Cup Finals, and it was awesome. But we're playing a team that I think had, including himself, nine guys went to the Hall of Fame. So and he was the backstop. He had Savard, Robinson, and LaPointe in front of him. But Kenny was a money goalie. I remember him in the '72 series against the Russians. And if you were, which didn't happen a lot, if you got around Savard, Robinson, LaPointe, then you had to beat him. And he was so big in the net. In those days, goalies weren't that size usually, and he filled a lot of the net. And I've had his book, The Game, at home for a long time and never really read it. And so I pulled it out after I heard of his passing. And he mentions me in one little blurb in the '79, of course, the Too Many Men on the Ice. He said that I scored 2 from behind the net. So that was his image of it, but the last one I scored with 4 minutes to go, I came out from behind the net, so that's why he thought like that. But I wish I could have met him and told him what happened on that goal, because there's a great story behind it, but we don't have time to tell it right now.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Pro Hockey Alumni channel. Let me know what players from the Golden Era you'd like to see covered in an upcoming episode. Meanwhile, check out this video of another legend who helped make the game great.
Tipped ahead by Delgarno. Weight is on him. Delgarno to Malakoff. Takes the shot. Moves in. Still with it. Can't it, but they score! Oh, what a play by Vladimir Malakoff to set up Delgarno, and just a fabulous play.